I think we should start.
Okay,
So,
you're going to do an introduction?
I will. Leslea
Okay.
Newman is here as part of the Being Mortal series of events that are happening all over the region, 15 different communities. And she's going to read from her book, I Carry My Mother. And we're in the same writing group, and I'm very excited to have Leslea here. And she's done a lot of other things, too. Thanks, Leslea.
Well, I'm always particularly fond of readings with small audiences because it's very intimate and we can really connect, and that's really a wonderful thing. So this is just very cozy. So before I read from the book, you know, I've been reading from the book a lot. It came out about a year ago, and one person, after I read, she raised her hand and asked the nicest question. She said, "Now we know all about how your mother died, but tell us how she lived." And I loved that. So now I changed my whole approach, and I start with talking about my mom's life. So, okay, here is my mom. Can you see? I'm glad you moved up. She was 1 year old, and this was her favorite doll. I personally have a fear of dolls, but this is my mom's doll that she's schlepped around everywhere. I mean, I wasn't there, obviously, but. And then these I love. These are two studio photographs of my mother in her ballet costume and her Hawaiian costume. So I just treasure these. I just think they're amazing pictures. So this would have been she was born in 1928. So this was maybe 1929, 1930, something like that. So she was the only girl. She has two brothers, two older brothers. And this, how old do you think my mom is here? Any guesses? Take a guess.
Let's see, let's think about the
30,
hairstyle.
30 is your guess?
30 or younger.
Yeah.
Okay, any other guesses?
I'm guessing,
25?
yeah, I'm guessing 20s.
15.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? This is 1943. And I love this picture. My dad says this is what she looked like when they met. And the way I got this picture was at my mother's Shiva, a very good friend of hers who I hadn't seen in a long time named Rosie came up to me and gave me this picture, and she said, "Your mother and I exchanged pictures when we were teenagers." And on the back, this is a copy, on the back it said, "For Rosie, so that you always stay true to me, Florrie." So I loved that. You know, it just showed me that my mother really took her friendships with other women very seriously. So these are my parents when they first met. So they got together when my mom was 20 and my dad was 21. And what else do I have in here? Oh, so then very shortly after that they got married. That's their wedding picture.
And where
They
did
got
live?
married. They lived. I always think everyone knows these things. They lived in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn.
Isn't everybody from
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn? Everyone's from Brooklyn, right? So they got married on October 1st, 1949, and they honeymooned in Niagara Falls, and they were the only ones in their hotel. And every night there was a show, and it was, see why I love small audiences? And there was a show just for them every night. And there was, you know, served, and so it was very
Why were they the
romantic.
only ones there?
I don't know.
What year was it again?
1949. And they took the train up there. And so this is my mom with me. So this would be 1956. I was born in 1955.
Big smile.
Yeah, and we were still in Brooklyn at that point. And my mom tells me she always wanted a girl, and so when I was born and they told her that she'd had a girl, she cried. And actually it was very traumatic because when I was born I had the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. And actually when I wasn't planning on talking about this, but why not? So when my parents got to the hospital, the doctor couldn't find the heartbeat. So they immediately rushed my mother in and did a cesarean and found the cord around my neck and wrapped the cord. And to this day, I cannot wear turtlenecks. So,
Interesting.
yeah. So then this is a park near where I grew up. So here's my mom and me at the park. I'm probably 6, so that would have been 1961.
Is that Brooklyn?
And that's still in Brooklyn, because we moved to Long Island shortly after
What was
this.
the name of the park?
I don't think it had a name. It's just the neighborhood park. And in this baby carriage is my little brother, but you cannot see him. And then I'm skipping ahead. I'm not sure, I don't have a lot of pictures in between, but this is my mom and me. Let's see. when I was 48, so that's 12 years ago, and I had an adult bat mitzvah, so my family came to celebrate that.
I think I came too.
Yes, you did. And I'm so glad you did. Oh, and my mom's wearing the bracelet that I'm, in this picture that I'm now wearing. This is one of her favorite bracelets, so I like to wear it and think of her. So these were my parents, probably in their 70s.
Wow, they look great.
And then this was my dad's 80th birthday. And so my mom was 79. You can see she has the oxygen tube. So she had COPD. So she had trouble breathing, and she also had cancer, bladder cancer. So those were the two illnesses that she so valiantly fought. And I love this. This is the backyard, and of course she is doing the New York Times crossword puzzle, which she did religiously every single day. And actually, I brought all of you a copy, if you're interested, of this magazine, which is Lilith, a Jewish feminist magazine, because I have an essay in here called Always a Crossword Between Us. And it's about my mom and me and the crossword puzzle. Pardon?
Is that the newest one?
This is the next to newest one. And then this is actually, it's so funny, we were just talking about A Letter to Harvey Milk, the show, so this was my mom and me at that show. She said that the show was 10 years in development. And at first, my mom said to them, sort of as a joke, tell them you have an old sick mother and they should hurry up. And then it got to not be a joke. And she said, I will live to see that show. And she died 3 weeks after. So she lived to see that show.
Now, and that, when was that?
That was 2012. My mom died August 22nd, 2012. So this is the last picture taken of both of us. And then this is Mary and my spouse Mary with my mom. So they had a very close relationship. And these are my mom's parents. So those are my grandparents, Ruth and Louis Levin.
I'm so glad that woman asked the question.
I know. I never thought to do that, so I put this together. So, you know, my mom was really very, very smart. She was born in Brooklyn, like I said, January 25th, 1928. Both her parents were immigrants. People ask me where. My grandmother used to say sometimes Russia, sometimes Poland, depend where the border was that day, according to the Tsar. So she actually had one short story published in her high school literary magazine called M is for ... and then the story is M is for Mother. And she sold shoes at Orbach's. Anyone remember Orbach's? Mm-hmm. And that is one reason why I love the cover of the book. My mother loved shoes. She had beautiful 6.5 high arch ballerina feet. I have size 8, I can't believe I just said that on TV, flat peasant feet. I did not get my mother's feet. I got my grandmother's feet. I always used to tease her and say, you know, I could wear your shoes as earrings because they're so small. But both my mom and I love shoes, and I always wear red shoes when I read from this book. So they wanted to promote my mother, and my mother said, no, really, I want to be a stay-at-home mom and raise my family. So that's what she did when my dad graduated from law school. But she was very skilled at knitting and crocheting and rug hooking and all of those kind of things. My parents traveled a lot. She did the New York Times crossword puzzle every day, like I told you, and she had a great sense of humor. She was very generous, very kind, and very missed. So I started writing this book, I Carry My Mother, actually when she was sick, because I stayed with my parents for a couple of months to help take care of her. And there I was back in my childhood bedroom, which is a very emotional experience. And so my furniture is still there from when I grew up, so I was sitting at my desk where I used to have my little notebook, and I still had a notebook, and I used to write poems sitting at that desk as a teenager, so that's what I did as an adult. So that was very profound. So I would write a poem a night while my mom, you know, after I tucked my mother in, we had hospital beds set up downstairs. So I would tuck her in, make sure she was settled, make sure my dad was okay, and then go upstairs and write a poem to just kind of help me process what I was going through, remember who I was, and just because, that's what I do, pretty much as a response to everything. So the first part of this book is written while she's still alive, and then after that the poems were written after she died. So I don't usually talk between poems because it's really one narrative. The book, like the October Morning book about Matthew Shepard, has a storyline through it. That's why I did so much talking before. So now I'll read from it, and then we can have a discussion. The deal. My mother's doctor tells me here's the deal. She's got 6 months to live, a year at most. His words lodge in my gut, a heavy meal. My mother's doctor tells me here's the deal. I'm very sorry, I know how you feel, but keep your chin up, don't give up the ghost. My mother's doctor tells me here's the deal. She's got 6 months to live, a year at most. A daughter's a daughter. My mother declares in her hospital room my fate was decided deep down in her womb. A son is a son until he takes a wife, a daughter's a daughter for all of her life. She's telling me I am in charge of her fate, while both of my brothers are deemed second rate. As she's born unto death, I will be her midwife, a daughter's a daughter for all of her life. I argue, I reason, I try as I might. I learn from the best how to put up a fight. My mother and I are no strangers to strife. A daughter's a daughter for all of her life. The papers are signed, I'm to do as she said. If she cannot be cured, she would rather be dead. Can I cut the cord of her life with a knife? A daughter's a daughter for all of her life. My mother knits. My mother knits a fuzzy pair of woolen socks for me to wear. The rocker creaking as she rocks, her knitting needles tick like clocks. She doesn't have much time to spare. Her body in such disrepair, she's grown as thin and light as air. Death sniffing round her like a fox, my mother knits. She claims the root of her despair is simply that my feet are bare. And so she knits and purls and blocks, determined to cast off these socks before death drags her to his lair. My mother knits.
Bye.
Precious mother. The daughter's heart aches, the daughter's heart breaks as she wakes and takes care of her mother. Heavy with dread, she creeps to the bed. Is she dead, or is she my mother? Hands cold as stone, she feels all alone, sitting bone to bone with her mother. Eyes full of tears, mind full of fears, how to get through the years without mother. The months have been rough, and though she's been tough, enough is enough for a mother. This much is clear, the time's drawing near. Is there anything dear as a mother? Her face thin and frail, her life growing stale, her body a jail for the mother. Will her suffering cease? Will she ever know peace? Can she bear to release her own mother? Too frail to speak, so withered and weak, the future looks bleak for a mother. Though hope is long past, the daughter clings fast to what's left of the last of her mother. Moon rising high, the daughter must try to whisper goodbye to her mother. Star shining bright, her mother takes flight. Godspeed and good night, precious mother. Once my mother pushed my stroller, now I push my mother's wheelchair. Once my mother fed me ice cream, now I feed my mother ice chips. Once my mother wore evening gowns, now my mother wears hospital gowns. Once my mother danced all night, now my mother vomits all night. Once my mother dyed her hair black, now my mother's urine is black. Once my mother watched Jeopardy each night, now my mother is in jeopardy each night. Once my mother was dying to live, now my mother is dying to die. It's time. My mother, pale and frail and old, her hands and feet so blue and cold, she looks at me with one dark eye. It's time, she says, for me to die. I know her life's a bitter pill. I know this has been coming. Still, how on earth to say goodbye? It's time, she says, for me to die. It's time, she says, for you to live. You've given all you've got to give. Just promise me that you won't cry. It's time, she says, for me to die. She lays her hand upon my face, my shattered heart begins to race, my cheeks are anything but dry. It's time, she says, for me to die. She turns from me and whispers, go, her breath as soft and still as snow, her final words a whispered sigh. It's time, she says, for me to die. And this is my mom's wedding ring. So this poem is about that. Parting gift. Plain, size 4, solid gold, worn wedding ring, most prized possession for more than 60 years, yanked off her swollen finger and slipped onto a braided chain, now resting against my hammered heart, to have and to hold till death do us part. How to watch your father watch your mother die. Sit beside him on a folding chair beside your mother's bed. Place a box of tissues between you. See how he takes your mother's hand in both his own and strokes it like a small, wounded animal. Do not speak. Do not turn on the TV. Do not shatter the silence around you. Let time pass. Listen to your father sigh. Listen to your father sob. Hand your father a tissue whenever necessary. Ask your father if he wants something to eat. Ask your father if he wants something to drink. Ask your father if he wants to go for a walk. Do not press him when he says no to everything. Remember, the one thing he wants is impossible to give him. Let more time pass. When your father gets up to go to the bathroom and says, hold mom's hand, hold your mother's hand. When he returns, give your mother's hand back to your father. It belongs to him. Do not tell your father what the hospice nurse told you. You need to let go so she can let go. When the sun sets, gather the darkened room around your shoulders like a cloak. Watch your father's undying love take your mother's breath away. She was just here. She was just here, and now she's just gone. In a New York minute, I lost my mother. How can the rest of the world carry on? She was just here, and now she's just gone. On whose loving breast will my head rest upon? I'll search all of my life, but I won't find another. She was just here, and now she's just gone. In a New York minute, I lost my mother. How to bury your mother. Slip out of the dark limo into the bright light of day, the way you once slipped out of your mother, blinking, surprised, teary-eyed. Turn to your father and let him take the crook of your arm like the crooked old man you never thought he'd become. Feel your heels sink into the earth with every sorry step you take. Weave your way through the graves of strangers who will keep your mother company forever, the Greenblatts, the Goldbergs, the Shapiros, the Steins. Stop at a small mountain of dirt next to a hole that holds the plain pine box that holds what's left of your mother. Listen to the rabbi mumble prayers you've heard 100 times, but this time offer no comfort. Smell the sweet honeysuckle breeze that is making your stomach buckle. Feel the sun bake your little black dress. Wait for the rabbi to close his little black book. Bring your father close to the earth that is waiting to blanket your mother. Watch him shove the shovel into the mound upside down, showing the world how distasteful this last task is. See him dump clumps of soil onto your mother's casket. Hear the dull thuds of your heart thunking against your chest. Watch how your father plants the shovel into the silent pile of dirt and then shuffles off, slumped over like a man who finally admits defeat. Step up to the mound, grasp the shovel firmly, lift it up and feel the warm wood between your two damp hands. Jab the shovel into the soil, toss the hard brown lumps into that dark gaping hole. Hear the dirt rain down upon your mother. Surrender the shovel to your brother. Drag yourself away. Do not look back. My mother has my heart. My mother has my heart and I have hers. We traded on the day that she gave birth. Each passing year the line between us blurs, until the day I lay her in the earth. My heart in her now cracked and split in two, her heart in me now wound on like a clock. As she and I turn into something new, the love between us hardens into rock. My heart in her a newborn morning dove, still safely tucked inside its sheltered nest. Her heart in me a letter signed with love, a treasure I keep deep within my chest.
Thank you.
From this day forth, whatever else occurs, my mother has my heart and I have hers. Stopping by dreams on a lonely evening. Whose face this is, I think I know, I recognize from long ago. My mother, can it really be? For days on end I've missed her so. For nights on end so desperately I've shut my eyes in hopes to see my mother smiling with delight and reaching out her hand to me. She floats by in a shroud of white and whispers, "Hush now, I'm all right. You promised me you wouldn't weep," and then she disappears from sight. My dream is lovely, dark, and deep, and I've a promise now to keep, and years to hold her in my sleep, and years to hold her in my sleep. My mother would not stop for death. My mother would not stop for death, and so he stopped, for she was ready for that final breath and eager to be free. Death pulled into the parking lot and climbed the narrow stair. To find the room that time forgot, my mother waited there. In sleek black tux, top hat, and shoes more handsome than a groom, a gent nobody could refuse, Death strode into the room. And though my mother lay abed, Death swept her off her feet. In one swift moment they were wed, my mother's life complete. The couple hastened out the door, he held her by the hand. Now she and Death, her paramour, dwell in the promised land. That morning was so long ago, yet feels like yesterday, when Death became my mother's beau and stole her straight away. Yahrzeit. Gold autumn leaves drift lazily through the air onto mother's grave. White winter snowflakes fall all over themselves to blanket mother's grave. Gentle spring raindrops are sent down from the heavens to wash mother's grave. Warm summer breezes chase pale yellow butterflies around mother's grave. Today marks a year. Endless tears soak one small stone placed on mother's grave. And this is the last poem in the book. I carry my mother. I carry my mother wherever I go, her belly, her thighs, her plentiful hips, her milky white skin she called this side of snow, the crease of her brow and the plump of her lips, her belly, her thighs, her plentiful hips, the curl of her hair and her sharp widow's peak, the crease of her brow and the plump of her lips, the hook of her nose and the curve of her cheek, the curl of her hair and her sharp widow's peak, the dark beauty mark to the left of her chin, the hook of her nose and the curve of her cheek, her delicate wrist so impossibly thin. The dark beauty mark to the left of her chin, her deep-set brown eyes that at times appeared black, her delicate wrist so impossibly thin. I stare at the mirror, my mother stares back. Her deep-set brown eyes that at times appeared black, her milky white skin she called this side of snow. I stare at the mirror, my mother stares back. I carry my mother wherever I go. And I have one more poem. I wrote this poem recently, and some of you know my work and know that I often use humor in my work, and I really couldn't find anything funny about this situation. But now that my mom has died 3.5 years ago, I've shifted, from profound, deep grief into kind of integrating that into my life and thinking about her, throughout my life, not just the last tough years with her illness. So somebody asked me to write something for an anthology about soap operas, which I don't watch, but my mother did. And so I wrote this poem, and the poem, there's a soap opera title in every line. And I hope they're obvious. If you were reading it, they'd be obvious because they're italicized. But you'll probably hear most of them. And the title goes right into the poem. My mother's stories are her passions, she reminds me, watching TV in her general hospital bed, and tuning out the doctors and the nurses with their masked, hidden faces who enter her room to soap up and cast dark shadows across the days of our lives. My mother is a valiant lady with one life to live, on the edge of night. As the world turns and her moment of truth looms large, she shrinks to her bare essence, frail as a flame in the wind, clinging to her search for tomorrow and a bright promise for another world. The first 100 years are the hardest, she jokes with her oncologist, a young Dr. Malone. I had the best of everything. Love is a many-splendored thing. Here are all my children, the young and the restless, the bold and the beautiful. This is where the heart is. I never wanted another life. Her show over, my mother stares out the golden windows, searching for her guiding light on the clear horizon. We remain a world apart, watching her rough crossing over Paradise Bay across the highway to the stars. The secret storm carries her 3 steps to heaven, and she becomes for generations a woman to remember. Thank you.
Congratulations.
That was really fun to write. So
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Wonderful.
you are so welcome. I'm happy to take questions, have a discussion. I was really actually happy to give this reading today because yesterday my Uncle Terry died. And he was an uncle by choice. He was my parents' best friend since junior high, and he was 90. So I had this vision of my mom welcoming him up to heaven. And I'm sure they were very happy to see each other again.